Hello YouTube, this is Billy. Today I'm working on my 1998 Chevrolet K1500. Yeah, this truck used to be four-wheel drive, and I burned up the transmission and it had a leak in one of my lines. Those hard lines under there, I'll show you the hard lines. Right here by the oil pan, you'll see where I've got this rubber hose going from hard to rubber to back to hard. Right here by the oil pan, I guess throughout all the years it vibrated and there was a pinhole. So yeah, I changed my transmission from four-wheel drive into two-wheel drive. This transmission I bought online and was shipped to me out of a was out of a Suburban, but it came from Buffalo, New York. In any event, ever since I did this, while I was doing that, I also replaced my rear main seal. So that's the only reason the flywheel was taken off of the truck, was because I replaced the rear main seal because it had a leak. In any event, right there on the flywheel, it's kind of hard to see, but if you look, you have to look really close if you're having a similar issue. But on the flywheel, there's a little flat spot in the teeth, right in there, and like over here on this side, I don't know how good you can see that, but over here on this side, you can see how healthy those teeth look versus right there. There's a flat spot in them teeth. I do remember dropping the flywheel while I was working. In the event, so for anybody that's having the issue, so for the last couple of years I've been playing with shims, trying to get the starter shimmed just right so that that the truck would sound normal when it was trying to start and all this and that. Long story short, yeah, I have done everything under the moon other than replace the flywheel, and seeing that this spot has gotten exactly to the point where it just needs to be replaced. So what I've done so far is, obviously you can tell that I removed the dust cover. That's the dust cover. I've got that set aside, and I've removed the two bolts holding the starter on, and I've got it zip tied kind of back out of the way. Before I removed the starter, I did remove the positive off of the battery. So the battery post, I disconnected there at the battery post, and then I crawled under here and got the starter set aside. So there's three bolts that hold the flywheel to the torque converter. You can see one of them right there. I know the lighting's never good, but there's one right there. In any event, I'm gonna put a wrench or a socket or whatever on this bottom pulley on the motor on this front side. I'm gonna put a socket, and I'm going to go clockwise to slowly rotate the motor so that I can get to these three bolts, and remove those three bolts that will disconnect the flywheel from the torque converter. After those three bolts are pulled out, the torque converter should be able to slide back, as in further into the transmission, away from the motor. And then on the back side, I will start getting the drive shaft out of the way so that I can get this transmission to try to slide back. At the moment, my game plan is to put some long bolts, these short bolts on the bottom of the bell housing that's holding the transmission to the motor. I'm going to replace them with long bolts So I'll take one out, go to the store, come back with some long bolts and replace them with long bolts. That way, when I get the top bolts out and get everything on this backside, drive shaft out of the way, these two bolts right here on this cross member, and those two bolts right there on the cross member that's supporting the transmission. Try to get those 4 bolts out with that drive shaft out of the way. I'm hoping that this transmission will slide back, and those 2 long bolts that I replaced the short ones with will support the front of the transmission and give me hopefully enough clearance to get in there to get the flywheel out and in with the new one. So that's where I'm at right now. Okay, one more thing would be I would need to engage the emergency brake on the truck. Engage the emergency brake, put some blocks to chock the wheels, get the truck into neutral, and then I should be able to start rotating this motor. Okay, I just climbed in the cab of the truck and set the emergency brake, put some blocks around the wheels to chock the wheels. Stuck the key in the ignition and turned it enough to be able to move the gear shifter into neutral. Again, the emergency brake is set and I've got blocks on the wheels. In any event, I've laid down on my back and came straight under the front end of the truck, so my feet are sticking out directly at the front of the truck. This bottom pulley here, that's the very bottom pulley on the motor. Back here's the flywheel, so my head is closer to the flywheel. I don't know how good you can see the bolts, sorry about the lighting, but I've got one bolt right there and I've got another bolt over right there. So in this position, I'm able to just put my hands down here on this pulley. I'm putting one hand on each side of this pulley just like that, and my left hand on the other side, and just with my hands on it, I'm turning it. So I may not even need to put a socket and wrench on it. I might be able to turn it enough just by my 2 hands. So in any event, I just wanted to share that with you guys. Okay, it turned out to be a 15 millimeter socket. Here's my 15 millimeter socket. Now, you do want the kind of socket that matches exactly to the head of the bolt. Let me show you the kind that you want to stay away from. Okay, so like this kind here, you don't want to use these kind because it gets less of a bite on the bolt and could potentially round off your bolt, and then you've got a world of trouble. So by using the kind of socket that is an exact match to the head of the bolt, you will prevent yourself from rounding off the head of your bolt. So I've got this first one loosened up with that 15 on my wrench and socket set. So I've got this one that I'm fixing to pull out, and then I will rotate the motor to be able to get to the next one. Here's another one that I can see on right here, and I might be able to get to it from there, or I might just rotate the motor and get it over here. In any event, there's 3 total that I'm pulling out right now to separate the flywheel from the torque converter. Okay, well, that's where we're at. Okay, for the first bolt that I pulled out, I didn't run into this issue or problem, but on the second one, it's like everything's trying to turn while I'm trying to loosen the bolt. So what I did is I took my wrench and I stuck it on the bolt, and with the wrench hanging straight down, exactly like that, then I just took a hammer and gave it some quick, swift taps to get it to start to break, and then it broke. So now it's now I'm able to turn it without everything trying to turn on me. So for anybody that might help, well, there you go. Okay, so after getting all three of the bolts out, now the flywheel is separate from the torque converter, and this big hole in the flywheel, I just stuck my hand in there and got my two fingers on the torque converter and push towards the back of the vehicle. It's not going to move much. It's only going to move about 3/4 of an inch or so. But that's what you want to do, is push the torque converter towards the back of the vehicle. Okay, so now that's done. So now the torque converter is separate from the flywheel. Next, I'll be trying to get the drive shaft disconnected so that it gives me, I need to be able to get the transmission to slide back. So that's where I'm at now. Okay, so back here on the drive shaft, these two bolts, and same thing on the other side. I'll have to get these two and those two bolts out and carefully, the drive shaft, I should be able to slide it forward. This piece and that piece, it's just kind of male and female, and they just kind of fit into each other. So I should be able to pull those 4 bolts, and then the drive shaft go forward a little bit so I can come down and then slide out. This piece on this right here, this piece right here, I went lefty-loosey until it looked like it stopped moving. So this little gap where my finger is, if I went righty-tighty, this would come back to this. So I went lefty-loosey and got it as far back as it would go. So that's where I'm at now, is this is a 7/16 to get these 4 bolts out, and that's where I'm at. That's what I'm gonna do now. Okay, so I got those 4 bolts out, and got the little parts. There's those 2, and then there's those 2. Got those out, and to get it to pop out, all I did was take the end of my wrench. I took the end of my wrench and stuck it in the gap there, and then kind of popped to get that to pop out. So now I should be able to slide this thing forward and then down and slide it out. Okay, well, that's what we're at. Okay, well, I got it out, and here it is. You want to make sure your caps don't fall off. You could take electric tape and wrap around it to make sure your caps don't come off, or just be careful with it. So there it is. Yeah, it did just what I was needing it to. It just, this end, I was able to slide forward because that piece just slides on the other piece. And then this end, I was able to come down. And then once I got this end down, I was able to slide out so that that piece separated from the other piece. So for the time being, I'm just setting it here in my truck and shutting the door and picking up where I left off, because there's another piece of the drive shaft that I'm going to loosen up and probably set out of the vehicle as well. So that's where we're at. Okay, so now that the rear drive shaft is out, this is the front piece of drive shaft. See that other piece just slides right onto this piece. In the event, there's two bolts. Sorry about that. Okay, so this piece right here, there's a bolt here, and bolt here. There's some nuts right down here. There and there. I will get those loose, get those pulled out. That's really the only thing holding this front section of drive shaft. On the transmission. So there's that we just talked about, and then up here with the transmission is very similar to where it just slides into the transmission. So once I get those two bolts out down here, once I get these two bolts out here, I'll be able to take this and slide it out, and then both pieces of drive shaft will be out of the way. And then it will be time to start loosening the bolts on the transmission. So that's where I'm at. Okay, in my case, my two bolts are 3/4. So I've got my 3/4 socket on my ratchet wrench with the short extension, and I've got my 3/4 wrench here. On the top side, I put this wrench, the box in. I put that on the head of the top there, and my ratchet socket on the bottom side. And I've already got this one coming loose, so I'll get both of these bolts out, and then this short piece of drive shaft should be ready to come out. Okay, so after getting those two bolts out, the front piece of drive shaft just slid right out of the transmission, and this cross member here and here, just got it still sitting, resting on those two, plenty enough out of the way. Now a little tiny bit of transmission fluid when those two separated, when that one pulled out of there, just a little tiny bit of transmission fluid. But I got some kitty litter, some oil soak that will clean that right up. So yeah, that's where we're at now. I guess my next step would be to get one of those lower bell housing, the bolts that's holding the transmission to the motor. I'm gonna get one of those bolts out and then head to a hardware store and get some exactly like it, just longer, maybe 5 inches or 6 inches, something like that. So, so I can replace those bottom two bolts with longer bolts, and then get the top bolts pulled out, and then get those two bolts that you see right there on this cross member, get those two bolts out, and those two bolts out on the opposite end. And once I'm at that point, I should be able to slide the transmission back to be able to get in and have access to removing and replacing the flywheel. So that's where I'm at now. I'm fixing to get one of those lower bolts out of the bell housing, where it's holding the bell housing to the transmission, the transmission to the motor. Get one of those out and head to a hardware store and come back with some longer bolts. That way those long bolts will function as giving me enough room to slide the transmission back, giving me enough room to get my hands in there and get the flywheel removed and replaced. It makes it a lot easier should make it a lot easier to restab transmission and get everything buttoned back up. Okay, well, that's where we're at. Okay, well, while I'm already right here in this little spot, I'm going to put it's an 18 here, and the nut on the other end of it is also 18. So I've got 2 ratchet wrenches that I'm going to put. I got an 18-inch socket on my ratchet wrench, and I got another one rigged up as well. So I have one on the top and one on the bottom. This cross member that the transmission support is this cross member here. Those 2 that you can see real far over there by that little step, as well as these 2 right here. One here and one here, and then here's the step on this side. So yeah, I'm gonna get those 4 bolts out while I'm right here in this little spot. Get those bolts out, and then, like I said, pull one of the lower bell housing bolts to take to the store with me to get some longer ones. Okay, that's where we're at. Okay, I got the 4 bolts out. I'm actually just setting them on top of this little support in here. That way I know where they're at when I need them and put them back. So now I'm gonna get out with those, get one of those lower bell housing bolts out and head to the hardware store to get some longer ones. Okay, that's where we're at. All 4 of those bolts on this cross member are out. That way this cross member will slide. If I can slide the transmission, and this cross member slide everything back to get into the flywheel. Okay, I just got back from the hardware store, and this is the bolt. This is one of the bolts that's the lower bolt closest to the ground that attaches the bell housing of the transmission to the motor. Went to the store and got me an assortment of longer ones. They're 3/8 coarse thread is what they are. What I did is, while I was there, I found a nut that went on the original one and felt exactly right, and then I made sure that that nut also went on the longer ones exactly right. I think these are 3.5 inches and 4.5 inches. It's, you know, I grabbed a different assortment. So in any event, I'm going to replace those 2 lower bolts with some longer ones, and then when I get the top bolts pulled out of the bell housing, then I should be able to slide the transmission back to give me access to the flywheel. So that's where we're at. Okay, so the 2 long bolts that I went and purchased are down there. I'll show you in a second. These upper bolts on the top side of the bell housing of the transmission, they look like this. And because of this stud that sticks out, you need, well, what I used was this deep socket. It's a 14, and you know, there was 3 of them on this top side. There was one on the driver's side, kind of up high, that was basically in that vicinity behind the those distributor wires back down in there. And then on the passenger side, there was 2 of them over here. One of them that was holding the dipstick bracket. Anyway, there were 2 on this side, on the passenger side, and 1 on the driver's side. I just climbed underneath the truck and shoved the transmission back. So this kind of 14 deep socket, and it's got this this shape on this end, so I was able to take a 5-inch wrench and put that on that right there like that. I'd stick that in there. In any event, that's how I was able to get these 3 on the top of the bell housing, and I had to do it from under the hood. This air intake, the air intake that sits right here, and the hose that comes over and into the top of the carburetor, I set that out, and you'll see it right here in the truck. Yeah, there's that. There's the air intake that goes all the way to the top of the carburetor. Now underneath the truck, you will see the let me grab that flashlight. Underneath the truck, you will see the okay, here we go. So underneath the truck, you will see the long bolts in the transmission pulled away. Get my little light going here. Okay. So under here, right there. So you can see the long bolts, and the transmission is pulled back, and there's barely enough room to get my hand to the bottom bolt of the flywheel. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. So now I guess I will take out that bottom bolt and then probably rotate the motor around, same as I did before, to get to the next one and work my way around and get that flywheel out of there. Oh Lord, yeah, so this is a little bit of a job for sure. Okay, well that's where we're at. Okay, now on in my case, I have the 12-point head on the bolt, and what seemed to be the best fit was the 5/8 12-point. So that's what I've got, and I've got my breaker bar just because it's got less meat, and that way it's easier to my ratchet is just a little too big to bulky to get in there. So I'm using my breakover bar, and then I've got my buddy Lee is helping hold the flywheel from moving. We've just got an appropriate size Allen wrench just shoved through like that, and he's just holding it. That way the flywheel's not spinning while I break them loose. So that's where we're at. Okay, so going in with the new flywheel, the first thing I concentrated on was the little nipple that helps you line up the bolts there. I'm concentrated on making sure I was getting that lined up, and to get the whole thing to seat on this little collar here, I actually began putting the bolts in evenly all the way around. And when I say evenly all the way around, what I mean is bouncing around, like if you were from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and you know, bouncing from side to side like that. That way it's just like putting a tire on to keep it coming down nice and flat. Now I've got yellow marks on ones that I've already put Loctite on, and that way I can keep track of which ones that I've got Loctite on and everything, because I actually ran the bolts most all the way in to get the flywheel to seat all the way, and then after doing so, then I took them back out like I am now to put a drop of blue. I recommend the weakest Loctite is, you know, so for myself, I'm just using the blue Loctite. It's the weaker one. Maybe putting a drop of blue Loctite on there on the threads, and then going back in, and the yellow marks signify, I don't know if you can see it, but I got some yellow marks signifying the ones that I've already done the Loctite and got them tightened down good. So that's where we're at. Okay, we got all of our bolts in with Loctite, and tightened up pretty good there. So now we're ready to slide the transmission back to the motor. That's what we're doing now. Okay, now to get the bolts going through the flywheel into the torque converter, because you may remember we pushed the torque converter back. So these bolts that we used, these longer bolts that we used to support the tranny while it was being slid back, is a really good fit for the torque converter. So what you got to do is you got to turn that bottom pulley of the motor to try to get the holes lined up. It is hard to see. What I did to help myself is I actually held my camera just as I'm showing you now. I held my camera like this on, to take pictures. So I would turn it a little and take a picture, turn a little, take a picture, and eventually I got a picture where I could see the holes lined up with the torque converter. So once I knew I was lined up, then I used this longer bolt to reach in there and screw into it some, and then pull on the longer bolt to pull the torque converter back towards the motor. And then on this other side, I was able to go ahead and get the bolt in, as well as this bolt in, and then I barely snugged them just a hair, and then spun it by hand around to the third one and got it barely snugged by hand. And then now we're going back out with each one. We're bouncing from side to side. What we're doing is we're taking one all the way out, putting some blue Loctite on it, and then going back in and snugging it down. And as we go, we're putting yellow marks, as you can tell, on that torque bolt there. It's already got the Loctite on it, and I'm fixing to pull this one out. So in the long run, I'll have all three with yellow marks, signifying that they've all got the blue Loctite, and that's where we're at now. Okay, now the tranny is up. Now that we've got the tranny bolted good to the motor, we've got the torque converter bolted good with the flywheel and everything. So now we're ready to get the starter mounted back in. And several mechanics have told me when you're going in with a new flywheel to go in with 0 shims. So every mechanic I've talked to, do not put any shims when you're going in with a brand new flywheel. So that's where we're at. We're fixing to get the starter bolted back up. Okay, we just got the starter reconnected to the truck. It's bolted in place real well. So now we're getting these bolts that's for this cross member that supports the transmission. We already got those two down there. You can see them down there. And we just got that one right there. And now we're doing this one right here. So that's where we're at. Okay, now we just put the front section of drive shaft in, and it just slid right into the transmission there. And then on this back side, there's these 2 bolts that holds it to this cross member here. So we just got those stabbed and got it tightened down. So now we're coming in with the rear piece of drive shaft. Okay, on this end, it just slides into place. And once you get it slid in on this end, then you're able to get this other back end into where it needs to be. And with the transmission in neutral, you're able to spin this drive shaft however you need. And getting these 2 bolts on this side and 2 bolts that look just like on the other side, getting that all tightened back up. And then now the rear drive shaft is back in. Okay, so now we're back on the top side. The breather, the air box, and the hose that comes over to the top of the carburetor. It has the small hose that goes into the top of this valve cover. It just kind of pops and clips into the top of the carburetor. There was 2 wires that I disconnected off of it that I'll hook that back up. And the box itself just kind of pops into this right here, and then into this fender well here. So that's where I'm at now, is I'm gonna grab that and get that back in. Okay, so we just got the breather box in, getting this piece into the fender well on the bottom side and into that wall at the same time, like that, just kind of down and over. And then those wires, I moved them out of the way while I was getting this piece, because this piece here just it's kind of a down and then back motion, and it kind of pops into place on top of the carburetor. And then this hose here just comes from here down into the top of the valve stem, or the valve cover. And then those two wires just here and here. And now the breather box is connected. So now we're just going to get the battery reconnected, and that's where we're at. Last but not least would be getting that dust cover back into place. And on mine, I just got zip ties holding it, and I've already started the truck, and it sounds great, sounds amazing. Well, for anybody this video may help, well, good luck out there. Bye.